Hello, I'm Michael Pascoe. It's Friday, October 25, the end of a week of higher than expected but still benign inflation. A week that saw a department store CEO admit to be tired of it all, while a radio station chairman prefers to put difficulties down to poo happening. We've discovered there had been more poo happening in Leighton's, wherein might be a lesson about the dangers of arrogance and deteriorating governance in a duopoly situation. There were interesting Wesfarmers sales and deflation figures, plus my favourite, Joe Hockey's ongoing transformation from debt warrior to hey big spender. So let's start with Trader Joe. I began the week wondering if the Treasurer might be tempted to follow Wayne Swan's bad example of raiding the Reserve Bank for a dividend. How extremely wrong I was. Quite the opposite, in fact, with the Treasurer giving the RBA an early Christmas present in the shape of an $8.8 billion capital injection. Of course, that means this year's federal deficit also gets blown out by the same amount and will now be close to $40 billion. But Joe has been careful to stipulate that the 2013-14 budget is Labor's, and the red ink is Labor's too. Funny thing though about that $8.8 billion cheque, the RBA didn't particularly want it. Oh, it's nice and certainly welcomed by the Martin Place Mandarins, but it wasn't on their wish list. So what's it all about then? As Deputy Governor Philip Lowe told a Melbourne conference yesterday, he hadn't been losing any sleep about the RBA's lack of capital, despite the bank's reserve fund dropping $5 billion when the Aussie dollar jumped. Yes, said Phil, the bank had been saying publicly for some time that it was the board's intention, its desire, to rebuild that capital over time. But it seems it wasn't in any great hurry when along came Santa Claus to boost the reserve fund ratio overnight. It looks to me like classic deck clearing, what new CEOs do all the time in the private sector. Write everything off and down that you possibly can and blame it on your predecessor, and then take all the credit for the upside from a lower base. What Hockey has done is unnecessarily borrow several billion extra dollars to make a big bet on the Australian dollar weakening, and it looks like being a good bet. The Treasurer is incurring extra interest costs of about $300 million a year, the sort of thing he used to complain about in opposition. But by fully funding the RBA's reserve fund now, he'll be able to grab nearly all the upside in foreign reserves appreciation from the RBA as the dollar comes off over the next few years. So while Wayne Swan's last budget will look worse, Joe Hockey's budgets will look better. Nice work. And reading between the lines of Phil Lowe's answers, it seems the RBA itself is reasonably confident of the Aussie weakening when the US Federal Reserve gets around to slowing its printing presses. As the Deputy Governor said, what's much more important for the value of the Australian dollar is US monetary policy, not Australian monetary policy.